I've been working on this graffiti name influenced by the Hobbit, and I thought I'd just share with you a little bit of time-lapse video showing you the process that I've used. So one of the first things that I did was do some rough thumbnails, just looking at ideas of how the letters might look and some of the details I might use. Then I penciled out the entire thing and I started outlining it in Sharpie. And at first my idea was to just go around just the basic outline in thick, dark Sharpie marker, like you can see me doing now. So I was just going to outline the very outline edges of the letters, and the interior edge of the letters I was going to do with a thinner black marker so that it had much stronger outline. But then when I actually sat back and looked at it, I didn't like that, so I decided what I was going to do is I was going to outline all of the letters using a thick black Sharpie. So once I decided to use the Sharpie for the interior outlines as well, I started to use them to do the shadows, and you can see me filling in the shadows in a sort of graffiti kind of style here of, you know, using thick lines and thin lines, and all of them are actually connecting with the vanishing point that is just below the dragon's tail. So each of these is sort of pointing, almost like perspective drawing. The shadow lines are all pointing towards this vanishing point, which I thought was the best way to give it a bit of motion and a little bit of urgency. I'd done some graffiti drawing before this, and I'd done the shadows in a different way, and what I'd done is I'd googled graffiti lettering, and I just looked at a whole bunch of the ways that other people do graffiti lettering and do the colours and do the shadows, and I'd sort of picked out a few things that I thought, you know, that's a good method, that's a good technique. So I just sort of took a whole range of different ideas from all of this artwork that I could see on Google and just sort of mashed it all together, kind of like make a big smorgasbord of graffiti ideas. The dragon is supposed to be a lowercase middle a of the name, and I think the dragon probably owes a big debt to the Skyrim logo. I think I've been heavily influenced subconsciously by the Skyrim logo, and I think when I stepped back and looked at it, I was just like, oh yeah, that that looks quite a bit like it. But you know, I wasn't trying to copy it, it just sort of evolved that way with the wings on the side. And that's it inked before I start going in and adding some of the little details. And here you can see me doing the coins and the jewels that are supposed to be encrusted, I think, on Smaug or Smaug's belly. I think that's how it's described in the book. So I'm just using a small fine line pen, I think it's maybe a 0.5, and just going around the edges of those coins and those jewels. You know, they're stuck to his belly because he's been lying on that pile of treasure for so long. So it's all linked up with Sharpie and waterproof fine liner, and here I am putting the colours on. So I'm putting a base yellow across the entire thing. So even though I'm going to use some darker colours later, I'm putting every single letter and all of the shapes that I want to have the same kind of colours. They're all being done yellow, first of all. The only thing I don't colour in yellow is the jewellery stuck at the bottom. Then I'm using a bit of grey to fill in the background, so I want the background behind the bright colours of the letters to be quite dull but dark. I'm not looking to blend the colours here, they're going on in layers, which means I'm putting on a colour and letting it dry, and then I'm putting another colour on top of it, usually getting darker each time, which makes it a lot quicker because obviously blending takes a bit of time and a bit of care and attention. I'm not having to do that. And you can see me adding blue now, so I'm adding blue cyan for the shadows, and I also did a few testers on this, and I'm also going to use a dark blue in there as well, French navy, to make that shadow just a little bit stronger and darker so that the letters are the brightest thing and they really pop off the page. I could have probably waited instead of filling in some of the shadows, but I was kind of eager to see how it was all coming together, so popping in a bit of the shadows at this stage gives you a good idea of how the colours are working together. And there I'm going on with my darkest colour here. This is a red that is supposed to be dark and shadowy because it's the base of the letters. When I've been trying this out, I had used a slightly more orangey red, I think it was called Sunset, and it just seemed to blend in with the orange a little bit too much. So I went for this one, which is Poppy, which is a much darker red, and really you could see a clear change between the yellow, the orange and the red on the letters, and that was what I was aiming for. So with the brightness of the letters coming together, I wanted to get that shadow in that background. So I'm using Cool Grey 4 and 5 here to do the wings and the general background behind the letters a bit darker, so they look a little bit like the sort of the dark inside wings of Smaug's wings. And up there I deliberately wanted to put an eye of Sauron above Smaug's head, and that was going to be my light source. So basically anytime I'm putting any kind of shadow or any kind of highlights on any of the letters in this, I'm treating the eye of Sauron as the light source. but I still wanted it to be in the background, just a sort of suggestion, just quite faint, so that's why I didn't outline it with any of the black pens. Here you can see me going in now and adding that darker shadow on the sort of blue parts of the letters, the blue shadows of the letter, and I'm using French Navy here, and I'm just using it to put in some darker areas. I want to leave some of the cyan showing through, which gives the shadow a kind of, hopefully a kind of curving, almost shiny kind of effect to it. The 2 shades of blue is just something that I accidentally came across when I was doing some of my rough ideas for this. So now you can see me putting on the highlights and some of the shadows, and you can see I'm using the Eye of Sauron here to be my light source, and I deliberately make sure that all of the highlights correspond to that, and I'm using a white Sigma gel pen, white gel pen here to put on the highlights, and they don't show up so much against the yellow background, but they show up brilliant against the orange and the red colors. In hindsight, the highlights are probably a little bit too thin, and I probably should have done like thicker white lines for the highlights. That's something I might try and do in future. With the highlights done, I just wanted to add a little bit more dark definition to the Eye of Sauron, just to make it stand out a little bit more above everything else. And then I had to get a grey kind of spray can background around the letters again, so you've got a dark background that the bright letters are sort of bouncing off at, so it gives a good contrast, makes it stand out. So I'm just using a cool grey number 4, and I'm just dotting and you know, just putting little dots of colour on there to suggest the spray can spraying. The jewels were just a simple 2 colour effect, so I just used 2 shades of blue, 2 shades of green, and so on, and it was just a light shade and a dark shade put on to suggest the shiny sapphires, emeralds, rubies, and the grey one is supposed to be a diamond. You might have noticed that the C didn't have the same kind of shadow effects as some of the other letters. That's because I wanted to give it the effect of being basically like the one ring, and that's why I got out the white gel pen here and decided to write the inscription of the one ring along the side of the C. So here I am finishing everything off, giving everything a light blue outline using a Posca paint marker. And I got to say, I was really impressed by this. It really is a kind of opaque paint marker, and it will go over any of the colors, any of the black that you've already put on. And it was a great way of just finishing everything off with a little extra blue outline against that grey. So that's the finished version of the graffiti name with the Hobbit influence. Hope you found the video interesting or useful, me talking about the techniques and the sort of approaches that I used to try and get it done. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, always appreciate that. And you could also check out my previous video as well. A bit of a change of pace, absolutely. It's me drawing a red tulip flower using watercolor markers, aqua markers. As a little end of credits bonus, here you go. This is my working rough drawing that I used to help me make all the decisions for the final piece of work that you've seen on the video.